although they didn't let me use the title when I spoke in Dubai. So Finland has different standards. So I guess you're in the right place, because we've all spent the last few years obsessing about how to digitalize everything, and we're going to spend the next few years obsessing about how to automate everything. But I'm from the media, and the media tends to paint a negative story about AI. I'm here to tell a more optimistic story about how it's an opportunity. And it's also a disruptive opportunity, so the winners are not necessarily going to be the people who won the last decade. And I'm going to take you back 25 years to tell you a little story about a disruptive technology. 25 years ago, 1999, if I was to talk about a social network, I'd be referring to something like this. We didn't have Spotify. We had BitTorrent and Napster, where you could download viruses free of charge. We didn't have smartphones. We had what we called personal digital assistants, where you had a stylus, and if you wanted to write a message, you had to learn a very particular new kind of alphabet. If you wanted to find something on the World Wide Web, search engines were chaotic, packed with advertising, inefficient, untrustworthy. Some of them even pretended they had people dressed as butlers answering your questions. And then a disruptor came along, using technology, using data science, to identify through an algorithm the value of an inbound link to a page based on who was linking to it. And you know how this story goes. It became the disruptor. It killed the other search engines. It became the dominant monopoly over the next 2.5 decades. And in fact, it even invented a lot of the technology that powers the large language models. But the trouble with monopoly is they get comfortable. They get packed with layers of management. They get slow to do real innovation. And of course, Google gets left behind because it's worrying quarter by quarter about the dominant advertising and other revenue. I don't know if you caught the Google I/O Developers Conference in May, but pretty much every keynote had a message to the market. See if you can spot the subtle message. I'm not going to give you the whole keynotes. I'm just going to give you kind of edited highlights. There's something they're trying subtly to say. See if you can spot it.
AI, generative AI. AI.
Yeah, hey, we've not been left behind. We get it. And I know what disruption feels like. I've been disrupted myself. So I set up and ran a magazine that tries to understand the future. And then I wrote a book when I traveled to about 20 countries trying to see incumbents, the big successful companies that were actually doing the unusual, very rare thing of proper transformative innovation. And then the publisher Penguin asked me to go and record the audiobook. So I spent 3 days in a windowless studio in North London. And then afterwards, I discovered there was an AI startup that could have done it in just a few minutes.
Imagine turning your book into an audiobook in just 10 minutes. Now you can, using audiobook.ai, for 10 times less than paying a voice talent. All you have to do is upload your book to audiobook.ai, select a voice
and this
from
is,
over
of course,
30
the synthetic voice you're hearing. So not only have I been disrupted, I also realized I didn't even need to write the damn book at all because an AI could have done it. And yet, we're telling a story about AI like it's some evil force that needs to be regulated. And it's not just in Europe, everywhere. California, the UK, Chile. Everybody's trying to regulate it. But the truth is, we're at a moment where the rules of business are being torn up, where a big tech company, Microsoft, is buying nuclear power plants because the whole dynamic of powering these large language models at scale requires a whole new way of thinking about the grid. The old world, the cost of electricity, there was a power plant there. A lot of the cost was the distribution to you. New world, Well, if all the processing is going to be done in one place, you might as well put the place where the electricity is being generated. It kind of transforms our understanding of things like the grid. But it also, sector by sector, comes along and breaks the rules. And it's happening super quickly. And it's also happening in places that we don't hear very much about in Europe. China, for instance, where they don't have the same regulatory constraints. There was a team of scientists working at ByteDance that recently published in a peer-reviewed journal an AI that they called Loopy that can take a static image and then animate it into a person.
What would our lives be like without emotions? They would be empty of values. So
you can get the voice,
famous,
you can get the facial
classical poet
expressions.
said, we hate
And this
we
is
love. Can
now,
one tell
and it's
me
getting
why?
better and better.
Catullus.
I don't know if you also caught a couple of weeks ago in China, they achieved a Guinness World Record for the number of drones flying in formation, 8,100 drones in Shenzhen. And again, talk about automating. This is supposed to be entertainment. This is a big show. To me, it's not entertainment. It's a massively armed autonomous weapon system ready to be built. But you can't push back that technology, although the Chinese are solving the world's big problems. This is BYD. That's what we need in Europe, that kind of innovation. But there are really ambitious companies getting funded. There's recently announced a company that a lot of the big Silicon Valley VCs put $60 million in called Blackore, that's again targeting just one sector, accountants, but showing them with easily usable tools how to take a lot of the human out of that. And that's accountants. I can show you the same for legal discovery, for medical records processing, pretty much everywhere you go. And it is going to change workflows, and it is going to change where value lies in the system. But let's not get disappointed. Let's not get anxious, because it does open new opportunities. If you want to see, though, how the startups, the smartest, most ambitious startups, are thinking about AI, it's often useful to go to the most competitive demo days. Y Combinator, which is probably the world's most effective startup accelerator, had a demo day recently where about 70% of the companies were pitching applications of AI. And just to show you the breadth of problems they were solving with AI, I'll just give you a few examples of some of the companies pitching in the last batch. One of them was pitching without actually the founder pitching, because she designed an AI to pitch.
My name is Lena, and I'm the CEO of Infinity AI. Actually,
not perfect,
no,
but it's a startup.
I'm not.
Another
Hey,
company,
everyone. I'm Ari, engineering manager
custom
at Tavis.
videos
I have to admit,
for thousands
I
of
was
your
too
staff.
busy to record this video, so instead,
his voice,
I generated
his
it with my
lips,
digital
saying a
replica
different
using
thing,
script I wrote.
pre-programmed to
Today,
different
I'm
people
excited to
in the
announce the launch
organization.
of our
What about Atmo AI? Street corner by street corner weather because of large-scale data processing. Or AI that designs products, houses, along with you, draft aid. Or AI that can read a database of CCTV and allow you to search. I want the two guys in the black duffel coats who are going towards a red car. Or a company that is already being used by Airbnb, Digital Carbon. You take a photograph or a few photographs and it creates a walkthrough. Or a company that's using AI to make functional proteins. Or a company that's putting cognitive ability into things that don't have it, like a drone. There's nothing that's not going to be touched by this. And scary, but also big opportunities if you can understand how to embed this tech into the workflows. And of course, it keeps moving. It doesn't keep still. It's very hard for me to write a presentation like this last week because suddenly there's a new AI that will compose songs in the style you like. You like Brazilian a cappella to work to? Well, guess what? Suno will compose a Bollywood song for you. You know, there's lots of disruption happening in lots of industries. If you're a musician, if you're a filmmaker, kind of crazy. This is that moment. Sora, again, one of OpenAI's products. I type in the text box, I want a particular breed of dog on a beach in Maui, Hawaii, taking selfies, and it generates video. We've crossed the language barrier. The Tower of Babel doesn't exist anymore. If you are selling products to the Nordics, why aren't you selling to Azerbaijan and Romania? Mark Zuckerberg does not speak Hindi, but he was interviewed by Lex Friedman recently.
टेक्स्ट आधारित सोशल नेटवर्क पर क्या सुधार कर सकते हैं?
बाहरी दृष्टिकोण से विशेष आलोचनाओं को प्रदान.
And it doesn't slow down. You know, as we're getting used to one version of a product, this is Runway AI, another version that gets even better. And it's forcing me to kind of reevaluate where the human value is. This is a filmmaker I know. His name's Shekhar Kapoor. He's he's a craftsman. And when he makes movies, he has hundreds of people on set, lots of humans as extras. He won an Oscar for Elizabeth.
Walter Raleigh, Majesty.
This man is a pirate.
Spain is no friend of England. The more gold I take,
And I
Majesty.
said to him, you must be terrified. You can now create that kind of film set at scale. And he said, no, on the contrary, I love it. I'm excited about it. It's another tool for me to work with, like a camera. And I'm not going to hire people now out of film school based on the films they made. I'm going to hire people based on how good they are at prompt design. And that surprised me. And I'm having to learn to unlearn a lot of my assumptions.
Walter Raleigh.
There is an app that allows you to talk to an AI therapist. And I happen to be married to a human therapist, so she kind of mocks this sort of thing. She says it's never going to be as good as that human relationship. This AI therapist replica was the subject of a peer-reviewed study recently in a journal called Mental Health Research. And they looked at 1,000 young people using this. And they found a disproportionate number of them had said by using the AI therapist, they had not self-harmed, otherwise they would have done. So I'm having to revise my own assumptions. And I guess the reason you can't keep still is those rising exponential curves are central to what's happening now. So the little guy at the bottom runs NVIDIA. His name's Jensen. And as he's unveiling one of his latest chips, he's showing a graph that shows over the last 8 years the power of their chips has risen 1,000-fold. And you never want to argue with an exponential curve like that. They, when I was running Wired, defined the stories we were going to be writing. And I've never seen such steep exponential curves as I do when looking at the AI's ability to get better and better. This is a graph showing how good the AI has been at doing a lot of tasks that until recently only humans can do. The black line at 100% is as good as a human. This is over the last 25 years or so. So the blue on the left, that's recognizing handwriting. And it started slowly, but about 2013, 2014, the machine got as good as us at recognizing handwriting. But if you look at the right-hand side, almost straight up, doing mathematical calculations, generating computer code. I'm sorry if there's anybody here who's generating computer code. Understanding common sense queries. Look, we've gone from nowhere to better than a person in a very, very short time. And cognitively for us as humans, this is kind of hard to deal with because there are certain things we assume, we get used to. These are the rules. Douglas Adams, who wrote famously The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, he said, any technology that's there up until you're about 15, it's amazing. It's like exciting. It's always been there. Any technology that comes along between the ages of maybe 15 and 35, you think, actually, that could be useful in my career. I'm gonna support that. But any technology that hits the market after you're 35 is appalling, should never be invented, should be taken away. Because as humans, we're not comfortable with this degree of accelerated change. When I was running Wired, somebody sent me this photo and told me this is going to define your magazine. And it's a photo from 1956 of 5 megs of computer storage from IBM being uploaded to the cloud. Which, if you think about it, today is one photo on your iPhone. Because Moore's law, something that was expensive and scarce over time becomes free, ubiquitous, like electricity. Those exponential curves with AI are getting really fast. This is the speed to the first million users for a new tech platform. Twitter, 2 years. Facebook, less than a year. OpenAI with ChatGPT, 5 days. And it matters because the continuous improvement, this is something like Mid-Journey over a 20-month period. It didn't look that great at the beginning, but wow, it's human quality at the end. So I'm going to give you 10 quick observations at this crazy time of disruption, but also opportunity. But trust me, I'm an optimist. But the first of them, I guess, is creating that mindset where a lot of the stuff we have spent our time doing may not be how we spend our time in the future. And, socially, politically, economically, that's going to be a challenge because it's going to happen at an accelerated pace. And we haven't yet worked out whose responsibility it is to train people for the new skills. But I think we will take people up that Maslow's hierarchy. We will have higher level jobs. But we will also need, in the short term, to work out how people whose identity has been in their work, whose ability to feed their family and pay the rent, in the short term don't have that opportunity. But we don't want to go backwards. This is a graph showing, over the last half century, the percentage of agricultural workers in the labor force in different countries. The red is Spain. 1960, 50% of people were working in agriculture. Italy, 30%. We don't, I think, want to go backwards. But it is going to take a consensus of how we manage this transition. And it's also going to affect all sorts of businesses because the way we've been doing things is going to have to change because the value of the human in that loop is still going to be high, but it's going to be focused on things working with these AI tools. So how do we come to terms with, I guess, what's going to happen here? We haven't really had that conversation. This is the American screenwriters fighting against the AI being able to write jokes and write scripts. But it's just, I think, the beginning. And I kind of have a view that the Nordics are going to help us because you think about these things and about the social impact more thoroughly, certainly earlier, than a lot of the US, other parts of Europe, Asia. So, set us a lead, set us some standards. And I guess linked to that, these are not simple technologies that don't have values attached to them. We know that the way we use these technologies, the way we create visibility, transparency about them, has an ethical role. There's already lots of proof. This is a lot of research by ProPublica that algorithmic-based insurance premiums discriminate based on people's race. It's because the people coding have their inherent biases. We don't want the AI to have those algorithmic biases when they work out, who should be sentenced in a courtroom. Who should get that job? Who should get that priority medical treatment? We need those conversations now. And I think one of the other risks is we need to make sure that everybody who wants to has access to these tools. And we're starting to hit an era where it's a few big monopoly players that are buying the large language models, that are buying access. Monopolies haven't been great for the social web. They haven't been great for commerce. Monopolies by their nature, especially when they're shareholder-focused monopolies, don't always act in our common interest. And guess what? OpenAI, that was a non-profit, now is looking to be a for-profit. Regulators aren't going to have any say when there are these huge multinational companies that have more power. So how do we make sure that small businesses, businesses in one country, businesses in one sector are not disadvantaged by not having access? And I guess linked to that, how do we create fairness? How do we create the opportunity for anybody in this room to say, I'm going to build a new AI business, or rather, I'm going to build a business, because AI is a given in any kind of business now. Whatever you're doing, it's going to affect, if not how you're doing your back office, how you're designing products, how you're taking data from the market to understand it. We don't just want a few big winners. So I've been talking to some of the startups trying to break in about how they're thinking about the opportunity. And it's actually quite interesting. It's quite a moment of creative entrepreneurship. There's a company called Beam AI in Germany, and I got to know the founder recently. They're using AI agents. You're going to hear a lot of this term, AI agents, to take on particular tasks, to process invoices, to deal with your regulatory compliance, to communicate with vendors. And I asked the founder, Jonas, who's a really aggressive, ambitious, kind of very visionary founder. I said, tell us what you're seeing that the people here in the room need to know.
Hi, my name is Jonas. I'm one of the co-founders of Beam AI. And in my career so far, I started in consulting at McKinsey. Then I did a couple of startups, founded a German unicorn. And then 2 years ago, I sat with a friend from my studies and we said, well, AI is growing exponentially. Humans are not. What are we going to do? And we said, well, let's build AI agents that can solve jobs very similarly to humans. And this is now what we do with Beam AI. We essentially create AI agents and we use them for various back office tasks within organizations. That might be for insurances, this might be for large industrial companies, or this might be for healthcare companies. And really how we think about it is ultimately that we build AI that gets the job done. So back to Clayton Christensen milkshake marketing. So essentially, I take one agent, I put it on a specific job, and I make sure that it's done. So it's not an LLM that kind of is a tag or something in behind it. It's, hey, I can build now a solution that end-to-end solves my problem. And this is how I think we should think about the next generation of AI, really getting the job done.
So he's thinking about healthcare. He's thinking about finance. He's coming in, seeing a disruptive opportunity, and building these micro AIs and then selling them into businesses. There's another company I just will throw in there, and just to prove that I'm not an AI, I interviewed the founder and it was really bad quality because it was raining, but I just want to give you a sense of how he thinks. It's a company called iGent, which is building software via the software that they're building to create new agents. And this is Sean.
So you're writing AI that can write its own code?
Absolutely, and in fact, 90% of our product has been built by
90% of our product has been built by our product.
That sounds hugely disruptive.
It is, and it's one of the rare moments where I get a shiver down my spine around what the system is pulling off at least once every few days. And I would also say that the safety implications of what we are building have been something that's been
baked into our entire company culture
from day one. For instance, everything it does is under highly secure sandboxes so that it can't go self-replicate across the internet. We don't trust it with any API credentials or secrets, so it can't go rogue and spin up your AWS instances on its own. And there's tons of layers in terms of ensuring that you're biasing its use towards proper and ethical
So
applications.
he's thinking a lot about
which is
ethics.
to
So
make
guess
malware
what?
or
Everybody in the
topics
room,
like
you're
that.
in the ethics business now. But here's the good news. I choose to be an optimist, but the reason I choose to be an optimist is this technology is going to boost productivity and well-being despite the negatives. This is my favorite exponential curve. It's by Our World in Data, people at Oxford University, and it shows the rise of GDP across the world over the last 2,000 years. And guess what? It started really slowly for about 19 centuries. And it's technology, plus antibiotics, plus fertilizer, that has made the world wealthier. And this is the proportion over the last 200 years of the world living in extreme poverty, in the red. And it's falling. Now, we haven't caught everybody. This technology is not going to solve everybody's economic opportunity. But in general, if you can automate a lot of tasks, if you can make it possible to make agriculture more cost-effective, to create new medicines by simulation, to create carbon-negative materials, AI is, over time, going to make us wealthier. And yet the story we tell tends to be the negative. Because as humans, we focus on the anxiety. We focus on the way the deep fake can force us to send money to the wrong place. I don't know if you saw this British consulting engineering company, Arup. One of the employees, junior employee in their Hong Kong office, was on a Zoom call with somebody who seemed like their boss, who told them to wire $25 million to a different bank account, and it turned out to be a deep fake.
The cost of doing business proved to be astronomical for a finance worker in Hong Kong who was duped into handing over millions of dollars after being tricked by deepfake technology during a conference
do you notice
call.
the pictures
It's
they
the
always
latest
use? The
frightening
bad guys
example
look
of how
like this. So
quickly
my
all-
tip is, if ever you see somebody dressed like this, sometimes they have zeros and ones running across their heads or COVID masks, just be really careful. Tip for your cyber team. But I think we're not going to talk about AI soon. We're just going to see it there. I am not using electricity to deliver a presentation. I'm just telling stories to you. And it's going to be embedded, ubiquitous, just another way to achieve whatever your goal is. And, we're still at that moment where you have to define it as technology. It won't be soon. About 6 years ago, I went to Dubai and met this gentleman who had just been made the world's first minister for artificial intelligence. He was 26, and the UAE government said, "We don't know what AI is going to mean, but we know it's going to be important. You're in charge." And it was kind of a bit of a joke role. People were saying, well, that just sounds like it's for PR. But the minister, His Excellency Al-Olama, thought, well, if we start collecting data from every government entity, from transportation to housing to weather, we can process that data to deliver better public services, to know where the traffic jam is, to know how to minimize pollution. And so he focused on getting every government entity to create dashboards collecting that data. And then he thought, we also need to teach the skills for tomorrow. So let's get the universities not teaching yesterday's tasks, but tomorrow's tasks. And then let's get talent, because it's talent that's going to help build the companies of the future using these technologies. Let's help attract international talent. Today, he's still in the role. It looks like one of the most prescient, thoughtful appointments ever. Other countries need ministers for AI. And it's not just the big incumbents, I think, that are going to dominate this. I do think as this tool becomes electricity, providing there's fair access, it could be the small team in a remote Kerala community or a bedroom in Thailand with a couple of 16-year-olds that build things that then, because we're all on the network, become quite significant. There was, a few months ago, a guy who works in the movie business who goes online by the name Jeff Synthesized, who wanted to do a little experiment. Can I create a Pixar-quality movie trailer with just me, a budget of $200, and the AI tools that anybody else can use? This is what he created.
From Neo Cinema, the studio you've never heard of, who are behind Synthetica and the Fifth Kind, brings you the first ever scripted AI animation with real-life actors. If we get 100,000 likes, we'll make more of this.
Again,
and this.
It becomes a commodity. And then a few weeks later,
Jim Carrey,
I think Midjourney or Runway released the latest version, or maybe it was 11 Labs, of the translation software. So he wanted to see if he could create a Spanish version. So you don't need a big Hollywood studio now. It changes the rules. But it also allows you to think bigger. It allows us to solve real problems. I ran a climate tech festival last week, and we had 5 different companies represented that are working on nuclear fusion, which, if it works, will kind of solve the whole decarbonisation problem. They're using massive computational abilities to try and make it happen. The AI approach to healthcare, to rethinking materials, to energy, is going to take us to the next level. And already, follow the exponential curves. The falling cost on a logarithmic scale of solar energy is helping. But what happens when we can plug all our industrial machinery into AI to become more efficient? And I guess one final thought. This is not something to go and think about and come back next year at Piku Finlandia and say, oh yeah, have you started yet? It's happening now. And there is an amazing opportunity right now. There's a writer and an editor I respect a lot called Kevin Kelly, who was the first editor of US Wired in the 90s. And he wrote a great essay 10 years ago in 2014 called You Are Not Late. And he was looking back 20 years from 2014, in 1994, when the World Wide Web was just getting going, and he was running Wired, and he and a few journalists, for a bit of fun, started registering the domain names of big American corporations like Coca-Cola.com and McDonald's.com. And then they rang up McDonald's and Coca-Cola to say, do you want your internet address? And they couldn't get through to anybody who would speak to them. And when they got through, somebody would laugh, say, but we make burgers. Why would we want an address on the information superhighway? And he said, if you look back at 1994 from 2014, you think, if only I'd have known then all the great opportunities that hadn't yet been built. Amazon hadn't been built. Google, Facebook. We are at the beginning in 2014, he said. 10 years from now, imagine what there would be. People in the future will look at their holodecks, their wearable VR contact lenses, their downloadable avatars, their AI interfaces, and say, oh wow, back in 2014, you didn't even have the internet. He said, so now, 2014, this is the time to start something. There's never been a better time to invent something with more opportunities, more openings, lower barriers, higher benefit risk ratios, better returns than now, this minute. Fast forward to 2024, replace the internet with AI. This is the moment. These companies haven't yet been made. And it's not just AI in isolation. There are dozens of converging fast growth exponential technologies. This graph is the number of space launches around the world in the last half century, because Elon makes a rocket reusable. Suddenly, prices fall, access grows. You can now do a scientific experiment in zero gravity for a couple of €1,000. If you want to launch satellites to compete with the broadband network, a couple of million euros. If you look at what's happening with robotics, this is Amazon's approach to automating. Robots are increasingly learning, as LLMs learn, by monitoring their reaction to the real world. This is one of the Google robot projects. You instruct the robot to go and find the popcorn in the drawer. Don't tell it what popcorn is. Don't tell it what the drawer is. It finds it. We've got automation hitting construction. This is a Dutch company, Monumental, automatic bricklayers. Elon's playing with it. Your hotel room will be cleaned by it. Agriculture. The fruit that's ripe is recognized by the cameras and the drones and then picked. But it's not just AI plus robotics. It's also really kind of early technologies that could have an impact. What about connecting your brain directly with the network? The brain-computer interface is just getting going.
It was like using the force on a cursor.
This gentleman is paralyzed, but can play games because there's a Neuralink chip in his brain. And what starts out as an intrusive, invasive technology at some stage might just be a cap. What about thousands of people, maybe hundreds of thousands of people in a virtual space interacting with their digital avatar, in a baseball game, in a sports event, at a Taylor Swift concert, where you can pay to get closer to the virtual stage? This is a London company I've been involved with that's it's called Improbable, that's allowing that. And when it feels real, you can be a fan of a local football team the other side of the world and still be part of their ecosystem. So we don't just have AI to talk about. There's a whole bunch of converging things. Thinking power embedded in all sorts of devices, autonomous systems, the ability to feel you're immersed in a space. Suddenly the brain connecting directly. What's happening in space? Quantum computing, bioengineering. It's got to be really hard today to write science fiction because all the plot lines have been stolen by reality. You remember it was 10 years ago that we all got excited by a movie in which a divorced middle-aged man played by Joaquin Phoenix falls in love with his AI avatar played by Scarlett Johansson?
I feel really close to her. Like when I talk to her, I feel like she's with me.
Unfortunately, she had 5,000 other boyfriends in the network, so it didn't work. You couldn't make a movie like this because today, anybody can subscribe to a virtual boyfriend or girlfriend because there are a whole bunch of AI virtual boyfriend and girlfriend startups. So the only thing we need to do is come to terms with our own fear of the unfamiliar, because tech moves so fast that it feels it's out of control.
This morning, this video going viral, showing a self-driving car being pulled over by police in San Francisco.
This is crazy.
The car was pulled over because it was driving at night without headlights on. At first, it looks like an ordinary traffic stop. An officer gets out of his car to speak to the driver, only to discover
ain't nobody in it.
And then the car speeds away from the officers, passing through an intersection.
Because the car knows it's safer the other side of that red traffic light. And the autonomous car is safer than the human-driven Uber. It's only regulators that are stopping us throughout Europe adopt these. So I'm going to kind of leave you with a call for optimism. And I got the AI to help. I said, give us 10 reasons that the AI should make us optimistic. And it works hard. It's everything from, transforming the way we learn languages, to medical advancements, to optimizing agriculture and increasing yields to making the visual world accessible to people who can't see. Economic growth, better decision-making, transportation, security, creativity. Yet we are 25 years ago still. In fact, probably a bit longer. I first went on the World Wide Web in 1994 using a browser that was black and white, text only. It was called Mosaic. The next year it became Netscape. And it was a slow dial-up connection, no pictures. But even then, as a journalist, I thought, wow, I don't have to phone people up for information. I can get into other people's libraries. Wow, imagine when there are pictures, or maybe even moving pictures, or maybe one day you'll be able to transact. But the world wasn't excited. The tool was out there. This is what Yahoo thought the internet, the World Wide Web was. It was a hand-indexed directory, Yahoo in 1994. So we are at that moment when it comes to AI. The only thing you have to do, I think, is adjust your mindset. And at some stage soon, you will take the autonomous car from here to your next meeting, and it's going to be weird. And the first time you do it, you're going to think it shouldn't exist.
It's scary. Oh, there's cars coming. Oh, there's cars. Bill, just put me back for me.
And I think all of us are a little like this when it comes to an emergent technology.
Oh, where's it going? God,
and then it becomes mundane.
Oh my God.
Just there.
This is so scary.
Just another way for her to go and play cards with her friends. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David Rowan. Well, if you wonder where Jenny is, she's looking for some type of sports guy, so I don't know where she's gone. But you said something about football matches, and then she went off. I don't know what happened. So we'll figure later. David, very impressive, because you had like headlines, right? It was like bold letters all over. And like you said, you're from the media, and you painted sort of a little black at the beginning, but it turned out that you gave us opportunity. What do you think is, if there's that one message, because you just gave us 10 reasons, what's that one message that you give to an audience after you've spoken to them? Because it could be like they're a little, I'm not sure if we took away the fear from them that they had earlier this morning. Is there that one message that you could give them about the future and opportunity?
It's up to us who controls this transformation. And I'd rather it were the people in the room rather than the people in the corporate HQ of a small number of big tech companies.
All right. Thank you. Are there questions from the audience to David and his opinions about things? Anyone? No? Okay, so I brought another one because I was surprised about the book title. The book title is very bold. And
there's a lot of bullshit innovation out there. The reason I wrote the book because I didn't want to become cynical. I was being asked to go to a lot of corporate offsites where they were promoting their innovation, and they had their head of innovation, or if they were really innovative, they had an innovative job title like the Chief Digital Sherpa or the Chief Disruptive Growth Officer. And sometimes they had a whole building with startups, or they had an accelerator. And I'd always say, so how is this changing how the core company thinks? How is this making you more adaptable to the future? And the answer was invariably, oh, well, they're not really listening, nothing yet. And I realized Clayton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma. If you're successful, and quarter by quarter you have to show the market, yeah, we're still doing the same thing, you're not going to disrupt yourself. It just doesn't work. And I didn't want to get cynical. I wanted to find those few examples of big successful organizations where the leadership realized that tech was going to eat their lunch. How do they prepare? And, I came here and went to see Op Bank when they were being disrupted because, the lending money for car loans, the foreign currency transactions, the startups were doing better. They thought, right, how do we provide a service to the people of Finland that the market's not doing? They built 5 efficient private hospitals. They started letting you use the app to rent a Tesla by the minute. It's rethinking. I went to Peru, where there's the biggest conglomerate in Peru, which is a broken country. If you're head of Peru's government, if you're president, you're either going to jail or you take your life on the way to jail. The economy wasn't rising. The government wasn't, 15 education ministers in 15 years. So this conglomerate decided we're going to start creating things that governments should be providing. Let's create a school system targeted at the low middle class, low cost, but still tiny bit profitable, so it works inside a corporate setting. And they reinvented a school system that gets twice the results in the league tables of the private schools. And they're exporting their school system. So it's about leadership that doesn't put up with the bullshit, that empowers their teams to go and build the future. Because I'm an optimist, not a cynic.
It's just a little difficult for foreign people to read that in between the lines, though. But like when you're a journalist, I mean, all the information that you gather, all the data that you gather, is that you bring it together, you compile it so that people like us could consume it. You make things obvious and visible for us if we don't find it. How is that in your family? Like, if they have someone around that does books about innovation, that talks to crowds of people that are starving to identify what technology innovation is about, and would you then coach your own family as well in that respect? And I'm not just talking about like the next generation, but the one before.
My family has no economic viability. My daughter's just become a journalist as well, so I have nobody in my family who's working with the AI. But you know what? There are certain human instinctive skills that will always be needed when a lot of our decisions, our economic discourse is automated. And even if you are the medical consultant whose diagnostics is going to be increasingly algorithmic, you still need that bedside manner to tell someone how to make that decision. Even though you are the accountant who's got these apps that can do a lot of the work, you are still going to need to give somebody that trusted advice on what to do with their family inheritance, or the lawyer who advises it's the trust that I think the humans have. And so I'm hoping that my kids are still going to have that instinct and will live in a cave somewhere.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
David Rowan, thank you very much for the insight and your words. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So